You know, it's like when you watch a pot of water on a stove, right?
Oh, yeah. Just waiting for it to boil.
Exactly. The heat goes up, you see those tiny bubbles forming at the bottom, and predictably, inevitably, really, it boils.
Right.
And I feel like we are completely conditioned to think that global crises work exactly the same way, you know, escalating step by step until war finally breaks out.
Yeah, that linear thinking.
Right. But if you rely on that boiling pot model to understand the standoff in the Strait of Hormuz right now, you are going to be completely blindsided by what happens next.
Oh, absolutely. That linear model is just, I mean, it's a comforting illusion, really.
Yeah.
A much better way to visualize global conflict is like an earthquake.
Okay, an earthquake.
Yeah, because tectonic plates, they absorb these incredible amounts of structural stress invisibly, sometimes for decades.
Just building up pressure.
Exactly. And from the surface, the ground feels perfectly stable. You just go about your day.
Yeah.
And then a critical threshold is crossed, the hidden constraints snap, and boom, the world violently shifts beneath your feet.
Which is terrifying, but it makes so much sense. And to understand how to actually see that earthquake coming, we are jumping into a deep dive today on this really striking analytical paper.
It's a fascinating one.
It really is. It's titled 3 Paths to Stability, authored by Lev Nemotin. And we're pulling from his channel and his work today because what Nemotin does is he completely strips away the messy, unpredictable political drama that we, usually see on the news.
Right, all the posturing and the speeches.
Yeah, exactly. Instead, he treats the ongoing crisis in the Strait of Hormuz like a system of physics.
Right.
It's governed by structural pressures and sudden phase transitions.
And honestly, understanding this framework is it's a literal superpower for anyone listening.
Superpower, yeah.
Seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you learn to read these hidden signals, you stop passively consuming the news.
Yeah.
You start actually predicting global supply chain shocks, tracking maritime shipping costs, and really anticipating market shifts before they visibly hit the mainstream.
So before we can even talk about how this standoff ends, we have to kind of look under the hood.
Right.
Because when I watch the news, it just looks like one big, tangled mess of hostility.
It does, yeah.
But Nemotin breaks the geopolitical structure down into 3 tightly coupled layers.
He maps it out brilliantly, honestly. So the top layer is the control layer.
The control layer.
Yeah, this is the state authority itself, the actual command structure.
Mm-hmm.
So in the context of the Strait of Hormuz, we're talking about the leadership and the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps.
Right. They're the brain issuing the orders.
Exactly. They are the brain. And then below that, you have the conflict layer.
Which is the physical stuff, right?
You got the physical military activity, the active deterrence, the drones, the missiles, the actual kinetic action.
Got it.
And finally, at the base, you have the economic layer. So that's the shipping lanes, the maritime insurance rates, the actual flow of global trade.
Okay, so it's control at the top, conflict in the middle, and economics at the base.
You got it.
And what really stood out to me is Nemotin's argument that for a crisis to actually resolve, you need alignment across all 3 of these layers. And this is the crazy part, they don't have to align simultaneously.
Right. That asymmetry is key.
Yeah. That asymmetry feels like the root of all the confusion in how the public perceives these events.
Oh, 100%. The public assumes that, like, if the military is shooting, the politicians must be totally opposed to a deal.
Because that's what we see on TV.
Right. But the economic layer often moves first. Or the control layer starts secretly adjusting its posture long before the conflict layer actually stops firing.
I have to challenge this whole idea of sudden resolution, though.
Okay, lay it on me.
Because Nemotin talks heavily about these transitions happening abruptly. But, I mean, if the public wakes up on a Tuesday and sees a massive de-escalation in the Strait, isn't that just spontaneous? Like a leader just woke up and changed their mind?
It looks spontaneous to the untrained eye, sure.
Yeah.
But Nemotin uses this concept of condensation to explain why it isn't spontaneous at all.
Condensation, like water on a glass.
Exactly. Think about water condensing on a cold glass. It doesn't slowly, gradually form a perfect drop of water out of nowhere.
Right.
The moisture is already in the air, completely invisible. The temperature is dropping, also invisible. The parameters of the environment change until they cross a critical boundary, and boom.
The observable state switches.
Yes, the observable state of the system switches, and the water droplet suddenly appears.
Oh, wow. So the preparation is hidden in the dark, but the transition we see is sudden.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. And it actually explains how the economic layer forces the hand of the control layer, doesn't it?
It really does.
Because, like, We think of the IRGC as just a military force, but they are deeply embedded in the economy.
Oh, heavily embedded.
Right, so if actuaries at Lloyd's of London decide the risk of a missile strike is just too high, and they spike maritime insurance rates by, what, 400%?
Yeah, something massive.
Global shipping immediately reroutes. That chokes off revenue, which puts this invisible structural pressure on the control layer to resolve the crisis, even while they are publicly launching missiles.
And that underlying pressure, that leads directly into the first and statistically most probable resolution scenario Nemotin outlines.
Okay, what's the first path?
He calls this path a regime continuity with negotiated de-escalation.
Regime continuity, so they stay in power.
Right. And he assigns this a 40 to 60% probability of happening within a single week of that hidden threshold being crossed.
Wait, really? A massive de-escalation in under 7 days?
Less than a week, yeah.
Walk me through how that actually works on the ground, because the paper breaks it down into these incredibly specific phases, right? Starting with a hidden phase.
Yeah, the hidden phase. That runs from day -5 to day 0.
Okay.
During this 5-day window, back-channel negotiations are intensely accelerating. Mediators from places like Oman and Qatar, they are working overtime.
But publicly.
Publicly, the rhetoric remains fiercely hostile. To the outside world, watching those television broadcasts, it might even look like the conflict is escalating to a point of no return.
Man, it's exactly like a swan gliding across a lake.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, from the shore representing the public rhetoric, everything looks perfectly rigid and aggressive, but beneath the water, the swan's legs are paddling furiously.
Yes.
That hidden back-channel negotiation is the paddling.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
Yeah.
So then, day 0 hits, the threshold is crossed. We enter the trigger phase from day 0 to day 2.
And what happens then?
Suddenly, there's a sharp reduction in military incidents. The missiles simply stop.
Just like that.
Just like that, we start seeing indirect signals in the economic layer. Maybe a slight, quiet adjustment in insurance risk pricing, or subtle routing experiments by a handful of tankers just, testing the waters.
So the swan actually changes direction.
Exactly. And then days 2 to 5 bring a partial reopening. Limited tanker movement resumes. By days 5 to 10, broader shipping normalizes, and the political leaders finally start using words like deconfliction or pause.
Wow.
Nemotin calls this the paradox of instantaneity. The faster the visible change happens, the longer the invisible preparation actually was.
The paradox of instantaneity. I love that. But wait, I have a major logistical question about that, though.
Sure.
Nemotin assumes the public rhetoric stays totally hostile while they secretly cut a deal. But historically, doesn't violently hostile public rhetoric sometimes back leaders into a corner?
It definitely can.
I mean, how does a regime scream war on Monday and sell a peace treaty on Friday without their own hardliners revolting?
Well, that is the most precarious part of Path 1. The leadership relies on what Nemotin calls behavioral rhetorical divergence.
Behavioral rhetorical divergence, meaning what they do versus what they say.
Exactly. They essentially have to lie to their own hardliners. They maintain the aggressive posturing on state television to satisfy the base, while quietly ordering the military commanders to stand down in the Gulf.
That sounds incredibly risky.
It is. It requires ironclad control over the military apparatus to ensure a rogue hardliner doesn't, launch a missile on their own and just ruin the secret deal.
Which perfectly transitions to what happens if that ironclad control slips.
Right.
If PAC-I relies on the structure surviving so behavior can change quickly, we have to look at the alternatives, like what happens if the structure itself fractures? Or if no one is willing to blink?
That brings us to Path 2, regime transition with interim government formation.
Okay, regime transition.
This is a true structural phase transition. This occurs when internal destabilization leads to the actual collapse or fragmentation of authority.
Like elite fractures opening up.
Right, fractures between the political leadership and the military command.
So the control layer shatters.
Completely shatters.
But here is the massive contradiction that I want to make sure the listener really grasps, because this blew my mind.
Yeah, go for it.
A lot of people might assume that a hostile regime collapsing is a good thing for resolving a global conflict. But Nemotin argues that a collapse is heavily worse for the global economy in the short term than if the regime just stays in power and cuts a secret deal.
Oh, significantly worse.
Yeah.
And Nemotin distills this into a crucial, unforgiving rule. Collapse is fast. Replacement is slow.
Collapse is fast. Replacement is slow.
Think about the timeline. Days 0 to 3 are the shock phase. Total breakdown of central authority, massive confusion, competing signals coming from different military factions.
Chaos, basically.
Pure chaos.
Hmm.
It takes until days 3 to 10 just for an interim leadership to even emerge. And you are looking at weeks 2 to 4 just for minimum viable stabilization.
And the reason it takes 2 to 4 weeks just to reach a baseline stability is it's a literal communication breakdown, right?
Exactly.
Because if the control layer shatters, the middle management commanders on the ground, they no longer know whose orders are legitimate. They just freeze.
Right. Who are they supposed to listen to?
Yeah, you can't negotiate a ceasefire to open a shipping lane if the guy on the other end of the radio doesn't know if his boss is still alive or even in power.
Exactly. The vacuum of power means the economic layer and the conflict layer spiral out of control because the coordinating brain is missing.
Wow.
If the structure must change, the resolution will be painfully slow. Months, potentially. Which is why Path 2 has a very low short-term probability, under 5% within a week.
Collapse is fast. Replacement is slow.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense when you look at it as a structural physics problem instead of like a political wish list.
Right.
So if Path 2 is structural collapse, Path 3 has to be the scenario where neither side blinks, but they don't collapse either, just a perpetual stalemate. Does Namoten have a timeline for that?
He does. And the short-term probability is actually really high, roughly 40 to 50%. Path 3 is the prolonged standoff.
Prolonged standoff.
The regime maintains its cohesion, but the system enters what Namoten calls a metastable oscillatory state.
A metastable oscillatory state. Okay, let me try to visualize that. It's less like a washing machine off balance and more like a controlled burn in a forest.
Okay, I see where you're going.
Like both sides are actively setting fires, launching drones, seizing ships, but they are carefully managing the perimeter so it doesn't burn the whole forest down. It's highly volatile, but deliberately contained.
That is a much more accurate way to look at it. It is a dynamic equilibrium of controlled escalation.
Dynamic equilibrium.
Yeah, so you see intense disruption in shipping for the first few weeks. But as we move into months 1 through 3, the world adapts.
Oh, right, like routing around it.
Exactly. Shipping gets rerouted around the Cape of Good Hope. Naval escorts become standard procedure. The risk environment remains elevated, but it becomes a stable, priced-in kind of risk.
And for you listening, this is the phase where you suddenly notice the cost of your electronics or, your imported groceries creeping up.
Hitting your wallet.
Because that dynamic equilibrium just added an extra 4,000 miles to a cargo ship's journey, burning thousands of tons of extra fuel.
Exactly.
The system neither resolves nor collapses. It just vibrates indefinitely, taxing the global economy until it eventually slides into either Path 1 or Path 2.
So we have our 3 paths. The obvious question now is how to actually use this information.
Right. How do we spot it?
Well, Namoten doesn't just provide theory. He gives us practical toolkit. He lays out 3 leading indicators, early warning signals, for detecting that a hidden threshold is being crossed.
Okay, so how do we see the invisible condensation on the glass before the drop forms? What's the first signal?
First, you look for that behavioral rhetorical divergence we discussed earlier.
Right. Saying one thing, doing another.
You are looking for a moment where the physical actions on the ground actually become slightly less aggressive. Maybe fewer drone launches, less harassment of vessels, even while the language on television remains just as fiery and hostile.
Because they have to maintain the public image of strength for the hardliners while the back-channel deal is finalized.
Exactly.
So if the public speeches are a smokescreen, where is the actual truth leaking out? You mentioned the economic layer earlier. Is that where we see the cracks first?
Yes. The second signal is economic microsignals.
Microsignal.
You don't wait for a grand announcement that the Strait is open. You look for quiet, subtle experiments, a single tanker attempting a new route, or, most importantly, subtle adjustments in maritime insurance risk pricing.
The insurance guys know?
Oh, the insurance markets often know a deal is done way before the public does.
That is wild. So if you want to know if a war is ending, stop paying attention to the fiery political speeches and start paying attention to the actuaries setting maritime insurance premiums.
The math doesn't lie.
The math doesn't lie. What's the third indicator?
The third leading indicator ties it all together. Mediator activity. You look for indirect, vague references in the press to channels, contacts, or constructive engagement.
Boring and diplomatic words.
Exactly. You won't see reports of a signed treaty, But you will see reports that diplomats from Oman or Qatar are suddenly very, very busy.
Okay, so to synthesize Nemotin's final rule, and this is really the golden takeaway of the whole paper, the question isn't whether abrupt change is possible. It clearly is.
Right.
The real question is which layers of the system have to change. If the structure must change, the resolution is slow. If only the behavior must change, the resolution is fast.
Yep.
And if neither changes, you get prolonged instability.
And that mental model is a superpower. Whether you are analyzing the Strait of Hormuz, a massive supply chain disruption, or even like a corporate boardroom standoff, stop looking for linear progress.
Look under the surface.
Start looking for the divergence between public rhetoric and hidden economic microsignals. That is how you see the future before it happens.
I mean, we've completely rewired how to look at crises today. No more boiling pots, only threshold systems and sudden quantum jumps.
It's a whole new lens.
It really is. But wait, as we're talking through this, there is a terrifying blind spot in Nemotin's path-eye model that just occurred to me.
Oh, what is it?
This whole idea of a sudden, peaceful resolution relies on human leaders knowing it's all a bluff, right? They can secretly, rationally negotiate a peace deal in the dark while publicly, emotionally screaming at each other in the light.
Right. Behavioral rhetorical divergence relies entirely on human nuance.
Exactly. But we are moving into an era of algorithmic trading and automated military intelligence analysis.
Right.
The machines don't know it's a swan.
Oh, wow.
They just read the hostile public data, the speeches, the rigid posture above the water. So what happens when an autonomous system decides the threshold for war has been crossed before the humans can finish their secret peace deal?
An algorithm sees the fiery speeches on day -2 and just triggers a massive economic sell-off. Or worse, an automated defense protocol.
Will the illusion of instantaneity, the fact that we hide our peaceful intentions behind hostile words, will that eventually cause an accidental war because our systems are just too fast to wait for the hidden threshold to cross?
It might force it.
Right. Will the algorithms force a path to structural collapse simply because they couldn't see the path ideal being made in the shadows?
That is the ultimate danger of a threshold system. If you misread the pressure, you trigger the earthquake yourself.
And suddenly those invisible tectonic plates aren't just shifting on their own. We're the ones inadvertently snapping them.
It's chilling thought.
Definitely something to think about the next time you see the pot starting to boil.